Good morning and welcome to this HTML5 course. In this chapter, we will see how to add margins and borders. First of all, the basic concept of the box model. Each block element has the model and therefore allows you to define and change the spaces and borders. So, here is what the box model looks like. You can see in blue we have the content, and between the content and its border we have a margin called the padding, which is between other content and its border. As for the margin, it will be outside the border. We will see this in practice later. Then, how to work with the margin and the padding. So in fact, you can use them with one value for all the borders. That is to say, for example, if you put a margin at 20 pixels, it will be applied to all the borders, whether they are on the top, the right, the bottom, or the left. There will be 20 pixels of margin. You can use it with two values. So for example, here I put 10 pixels as the first value and 40 pixels as the second value, which means that at the top and bottom you will have a margin of 10 pixels. At the right and left, you will have a margin of 40 pixels. We can also use it with four values, so we start at the top and turn in a clockwise direction. So at the top we will have 0 pixels, on the right 30 pixels, at the bottom 10 pixels, and on the left 50 pixels. Finally, we can work with the border styles directly by indicating, for example, the margin right. So you will only have a margin on the right, the padding bottom you will have a padding only at the bottom, border top, and margin left. Work with borders. Here is what your code will look like. You will have to choose a selector, so it could be any tag, class or ID you choose. Let's say that here it is, for example, your H1. You will put your border 1 pixel. So 1 pixel will correspond to your thickness, so it will always be in this direction. We will take three values, so 1 pixel is the thickness. Then the second value is solid, but it can very well be dashed or dotted. In fact, it will be the design of your border, so it can be united, continuous, it can be small points, small lines. It's according to your choice. Then the last value blue, which corresponds to the color of your border. So we will see all that as an example. Back to our code, we will see how to manipulate the margin and padding in an example. So here we had our header, which is shown here in yellow on our rendering, and we're going to modify the margin that we had set, a margin of 10. Let's see what it looks like if I set it to 0 and refresh my page. You can see that now my margin has disappeared. I'm going to add a margin to see here what it does. You see I put, for example, another margin and I say 20 pixel. If I refresh, you see who will consider my second value. By the way, I forgot semicolon. I update again. In fact, if you put 2 times the margin, it will not consider your first value. It will take only the second value. We're going to put a padding. We're going to define it at 30 pixels. We will see what it gives. I am updating now, and so you can see the difference. Here is the border, so the space between the border and your content here has widened and is now 30 pixels. You can see that if I reset it to 0, I won't have the space between my content and my border anymore. I'm going to put a margin back in, So you can see the difference. If I set the margin, now the space is white. I have a space between my border and the outside of my border. So the white space is 30 pixels. So I'm going to set it to 0 and I'm going to leave my padding at 30. You can see now that even though I set the margin to 0 pixels, I still have a small white margin in my rendering all around my yellow frame. Well, that is because we have an element called the body, and we need to set these margins and its padding to 0. So we're going to do that together. We're going to call our body, and I'm going to set its margin to 0. So in fact, when you have a value of 0, you don't have to set it to, for example, a pixel or any other unit, because 0 remains 0 in any unit. So if I update, you will see that I don't have any white margin at all. Everything is at 0. In fact, our body in our code will be located here. So I'm going to put my body here, and the closing tag is going to be at the end of my code here. So if I refresh, you will see that I don't have a margin at the top or on the left or on the right of my header. Now let's try to change our pieces. We're going to try to add a border between our content and the green border here. So we're going to go back into our code. We're going to look for our selector that we had put there. We had put post. We're going to add a padding to it. This time a padding left. And we're going to put in a padding left of 15 pixels. So if you update, you see that now I have a space between my border and my content, only at left, because we put a padding left. We will also try to separate our pieces. You see that are all stuck to each other. We will try to add a border between our first, our second, and our first pieces, and etc. Each piece will have a space at the bottom to separate them. We will simply add a margin at the bottom, so margin bottom, that we will define, for example, at 30 pixels, and we will see what happens. So if I now update, you can see that just below I have a space between my two pieces. In fact, between all my pieces. In this way, there are space between them. I can put a larger margin so that you really see the difference here. You see that all my pieces are well separated from each other. Then we're going to try to work a little on our footer. You see that is a little sad and a little all alone. So we're going to add a little bit of style to it. So we're going to add our footer selector here. And we are going to put a background on it. For example, we will put a background color on it and we will set it to black. So if I update, it's already bedded. We can put a padding on it. So here we will work with the values at the bottom and right, left. So we will define two values. We will put 40 pixels at the top and bottom and 20 pixels at the right and left. I will update it. You can see that it's much nicer. So we have 40 pixels at the top and bottom and 20 pixels at the right and left. Our piece is much nicer. It looks like a little bit more like something, and we're going to continue on.